Shalom from Jerusalem. In this week's Parsha, Mishpatim, we are taught about the small details, the particulars of how man has to react with his fellow man in order for society to sustain itself and to grow and endure. Ve'elu ha-mishpatim, and these are the judgments. The words "and these" connects us to what we learned last week. Last week we saw Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Mount Sinai and receiving the 10 Commandments, the big picture. But a society and a nation cannot live forever on that level. And so this week we learn about the daily activities, man interacting with his fellow man, how a society has to sustain itself, and how man has to live in order for society to keep going and to grow. For instance, we learn about damages. A person opens up a pit in a public domain, a person whose animal causes damage to someone else, a person who loans money, all based on mercy and companionship. We see throughout history great empires arising throughout the world, lasting for hundreds of years, conquering the entire world through their power. Whether it was the ancient Babylonians, the Greeks, the Republic of Rome. But in the end, no matter what type of society or nation ruled the world, the bottom line is that these societies decayed and fell apart for one reason, and that is because the bad and evil traits of man. Whether it was through corruption, greed, lust, whatever it was, there was a decay in society. Unfortunately, ein chadash mitachar hashemesh. There is nothing new today under the sun. These same bad, evil traits, no matter what type of government or society you have, whether it's socialism, communism, democracy, it all boils down to how man interacts with his fellow man. When there is corruption and greed, no matter how long it takes, there will be a decline and a decay, and in the end, that society will not endure. The Torah teaches us something totally different. In this week's Parsha, which fills many Talmudic volumes of small and unite details of these particular social laws, it teaches us how to interact with our fellow man, to make a just, compassionate, merciful society. For without it, nothing can last. Take, for instance, the example that the Parsha opens up with, an Eved Ivri, a slave. A person who's sold into slavery is someone who is a thief, who has stole, and now he has to repay his society. He stays for a number of years by his master, but his master is not free to treat him as he wishes, unlike other societies where they have slaves. In Jewish law, the master is obligated to give him the best of the best, exactly the same level that he sustains. He also has to hand over to his slave. For instance, if the master sleeps on 2 pillows at night, he must give 2 pillows to his slave. If the master partakes of a steak, he must give also the same type of food to his slave. In this way, there is social justice. Just think for yourself that a Roman slave, he would be a slave forever, never getting out of it. A fate worse than death. So that's what I'm talking about. Social justice. This is what the Torah is teaching us in this week's Parsha, by going down to the smallest details in order to teach us how a society could sustain itself and continue and endure, as opposed to other societies throughout history who rose to great powers, but in the end, through decay and through horrible moral bad traits and evilness of these people, fell apart, conquered. And just a footnote in history. Interesting that we find toward the end of our weekly reading, we find God telling us, "My angel shall go before you and bring you into the land where the 7 nations dwelled." And God says, "I will annihilate them. I will wipe them out before you." Why is this? Why is the emphasis over here that when the Jewish people enter into their own homeland, the nations that lived here must be taken out of the picture? Why can't they live together with the Jewish people? And the answer is quite clear. Because in order to make this type of ideal society, where these beautiful social justice laws take place, you cannot have the evil influence upon you. That is why these nations who are so embedded with bad traits and evilness must be taken out of the picture and taken out of the land. Because the Jewish people, in order to blossom and to bloom, cannot have any of these evil influences upon them. That's what I'm talking about. There must be separation. Separation between Israel and the nations. Otherwise, it won't endure. That's what we have today. Today also, Western culture and evil influences penetrate upon the Jewish people. There must be separation. The nations must be removed, as the Torah tells us over here, and the Jews must live a separate life, an ideal life, in order for them to be a light unto the nations. So we see in this week's Parsha, if we could summarize, we have over here the great concept of social justice, the way a society must interact with each other in order for it to endure and to stay. Otherwise, it falls into decay like all the other great empires of the world. But in order for us to do this, in order to have this just and beautiful society, first there must be separation. Separation between Israel and the nations. Their influence, their evil influence cannot penetrate the Jewish people. Only in this way can we form the just society which the Torah tells about. That's what I'm talking about. I'm Levi Chazan from Yeshivat Rayona Yehudi in Yerushalayim. Have a great Shabbos.